Years ago, I transitioned away from D&D and discovered Champions 4th Edition. I searched for a group and found this GM who seemed really knowledgeable and friendly. His group was equally welcoming. I had an idea for a character inspired by the villain in T2 and Wolverine. I was happy the system could create anything I imagined. However, these things changed during the first adventure. We arrived in New Orleans and uncovered some mystical mystery. A powerful vampire invited us in, and I asked for a description of the character. What I received instead was a picture from Playgirl magazine. The dude was fully erect and lounging on the couch. Within hours, the GM introduced each and every NPC with naked pictures of men and women, sometimes in mid. Why? I realized that day that I did not like my superhero gaming mixed with that. It only took me 3 more games to quit the group. I just love my character, but I was psychologically damaged with that group. I don't know if we've diagnosed worst intro story, but that's pretty up there. As a DM and general D&D fan, I pride myself on my ability to help new players get their bearings in a weird world of numbers. I even help people bring unrealistic or weird ideas to life. Like one player once came to me with the idea of a cleric who worshipped a luck goddess, and whose spells were totally random and decided by dice rolls every day in-game. Instead of that, which sounded more tedious than fun to me, I helped him to create a trickery domain cleric wild magic sorcerer with luck bending abilities instead. He actually loved the idea, and it felt like it turned out much better than what he expected to be. But there, so far, was only one player that I DM'd for that was a total lost cause. He was really a friend of a friend, specifically a friend's cousin. Normally, as part of Session 0, I go over who was playing what, so I know what kind of stories or plot points people might be planning or if they need help building a character mechanically. Of course, if a player doesn't ask for help, I usually trust them enough to let them do it on their own. This was the case for the cousin, where I started by offering to help build a character since this was his first time. He told me that he's got it since my friend had loaned him some D&D books. My friend confirmed it, so I was okay with that. When I went around asking people what they want to play, I got to the cousin and his response was, word for word, I want to play a drunken master monk pixie. Huh? Okay, I remember thinking that sounded funny, but I wasn't sure if pixie was a playable race at the time. But I allowed it because it sounded like it could be really fun to play out. So the first session comes around. The players are all in the market for different reasons, with the plot hook meant to bring them together being the sudden appearance and attack of cultists terrorizing the town that would play a part in the larger plot of the campaign. Before battle, the cousin RPs his character sipping from a bottle of alcohol and describes his character getting very drunk from a little bit because he's smaller. Got some laughs. Then everyone RPs their introduction. Cue magical explosions and sudden pre-planned attack on this market. Soldiers rush in to fight the attackers. The cousin suddenly decides in this moment that his character is wanted for stealing. You, didn't say that before, I told him, but he responded, oh, it's part of my backstory. The backstory I, the DM, never read or heard about. On his turn, he attacks one of the guards instead, not the dangerous cultists attacking bystanders, but the guards, leading to the same guard attacking him on his turn. I landed a hit with the spear. I roll a 4 on a d8 and add +2. The cousin looks at me weirdly for a second and says, oh, I'm dead. At this point, I'm flabbergasted. How are you dead? You're a monk, right? He shrugged and said, I only have 3 HP. I asked for a sheet and looked at it, realizing that he does have 3 HP. In fact, the stats he's using are, and I learned this later, from the monster manual for pixies. Realizing that this guy had made something unusable, I told him that I was going to continue the encounter and I could help him figure out something after the battle was over. He agreed, and we continued the battle. Once everything was done, I asked him what character he wanted to make so I could help him real fast. He looked at me and said with excitement, a fighter with no arms. I shared his excitement, only because I thought it sounded cool. I could throw in mechanics of him using prosthetics, maybe throw in a bit of magic. I pitched some ideas on how the fighter could still be a fighter, but the response I got was, nah, I just want him to have no arms, so when he goes to do something, he remembers he doesn't have arms and gets sad. This was the first time I ever vetoed a character idea. I told him no, mainly on the grounds that D&D, at the end of the day, is still a game. You can make jokes, but even the weirdest character joke should have something that can contribute to the party. A fighter who can't do anything but stand there would be a burden to the party, and the joke about him forgetting about his disability would get old fast, and also might make people uncomfortable. So I suggested he try a different idea. Up to this point, he didn't seem to get mad or angry. We were just having a normal conversation. Yet, I feel like the next character he made was specifically out of spite for me telling him he had to contribute. Cue character number 3, Pacifist Bard. Clearly, this character was much less about one-liners and had more of a role in the party, but it quickly became obvious that this guy had no plans to actually work with the party. I almost wished I had kept the Sprite Monk and just revived him after every battle. This bard was more properly made, but he was also made with point buy, with the player dumping all of his points into charisma, leading to him acting like he was the only one who could do anything charismatic, not to mention trying to abuse the persuasion skill to steal money from the party. He didn't actually roleplay all that much, just rolled persuasion at random times, ran away from battle, or just got mad when the party did a persuasion roll without letting him do it instead, even if he wasn't even there at the time. Ultimately, I realized he only cared about being the center of attention, being the joke that everyone laughs at, or being the character who is the center of everything. I didn't kick him, but only because he left after the second session. I haven't played with him since, and I really don't care to. But he helped me realize that some people make fun characters, while others only care about the attention said characters give them. Because once he made a character that wasn't totally humorous, he did everything he could to just hog the spotlight. I am of the belief that characters should contribute something to the D&D group. It doesn't need to be something mechanical, it just needs to be something. Like the character could contribute jokes or fun, but the point is that they need to help out the rest of the group. This is a cooperative game. If your character is just there to be the center of attention, then what's the point of having them there at all? You're supposed to be working together with the other players to create a cool story with them. Your character does need to contribute to that story in some way. This guy clearly didn't do that. It's great that this DM tries to make character concepts work, by the way. That's a great habit to get into as a dungeon master. Sometimes you're going to need to stretch the concept, but most concepts, you can make it work. On the other hand, up close and personal monk with 3 hit points? Yeah, maybe not. Okay, for some of you reading this, my horror story may not be that horrific, but hear me out. I suffer from crippling dice envy. Seriously, it is so hard for me to find good dice for a reasonable price. My fellow players always have something nice, while I'm left in the dirt. If only I had found Arcana Vault. Arcana Vault is a dice and tabletop accessory company that make some beautiful resin, acrylic, and metal dice. You can get the Arcana Black Mystery Pack for under $10 to get a random set of their beautiful dice. These aren't some defective copies, these are their genuine dice for under $10, and it is absolutely worth it. However, if the thrill of luck does not allure you, then you can get specific sets on their website, including some limited edition, beautiful, handcrafted metal and gemstone dice right there on the Arcana Vault site. If you're interested, you can head down into the description down below where you can find the affiliate link to pick up your own dice from Arcana Vault. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so that we can get back to the video. I'm a female college student, I am also a lesbian, and all my friends are aware of this. My now former dungeon master, however, did not care. We lived on the same floor of our dorm and met up in the rec room every week to play our campaign. Things went smoothly at first, and at the beginning I was friends with the DM and would hang out with him and other friends around campus. Then, things got weird. He started showing me his giant hentai folders full of characters from popular shows, and he started telling me all about how much he loves big breasts and is turned on by succubi. That same week, he started a new campaign and insisted that I make my player character a succubi with huge breasts, he elaborated. I was obviously creeped out and refused. Oh god, it's gonna be one of these days. Forward onto the breach. Like all nice guys, if you're even remotely friendly with them, they'll assume that it's because you must have a thing for them. The next week, he came to me telling me that he was in love with me. I told him that I did not feel the same way for him, and reminded him that I like girls. Then I left and stopped talking to him. The very next day, he left a note on my door asking me to talk to him in his room for closure. That didn't sound like a good idea, so I threw out the note and didn't talk to him. He kept messaging me to ask if I got the note.
I assume you got my note. Let me know when you want to talk.
I ignored him, and then he began asking people to go to my door and let me know that he wanted to talk to me. I told everyone what was going on, and thankfully, they stopped bothering me. Later, we went to Comic-Con for a dorm field trip, and he would not leave me alone. I got frustrated and told him that I needed alone time. I didn't feel comfortable around him. Later, he got all depressed and PM'd me on Discord while we were still at Comic-Con to ask me again if I had feelings for him. I let him know my answer wouldn't change.
What did you say your astrology signs were? Hey, I've been overthinking a lot lately. Do you just see me as a friend, or do you think that anything is possible for you and I in the future?
Just a friend.
Okay, that's fine. I am glad you were honest with me. Hey, come talk to me soon. I'm just looking for closure. Are you still up for the Cyberpunk and Norse D&D campaigns?
No, won't have time.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
Later on, he started going around telling our friends that I
led him on.
And they all just laughed at him and told him that I was a lesbian. Afterwards, he was kind of ostracized and people stopped joining his D&D campaigns because he would bring me up every session to complain or ask people about me and my business. One friend mentioned to him that I had a crush on a girl from another dorm building, and he PM'd this friend asking him to jeopardize things for me because he didn't want to see me with anyone else.
Boy, just tell Purple Redacted that girl is busy. Sorry, jealousy talking.
Damn, don't be rude, man. Chillax.
I'm trying.
Like, don't despise someone's chances like that. It's not cool, no offense.
I know. I just get jealous.
News of that occurrence went around, and anyone that still had some respect left towards him immediately lost what was left of it. I didn't go back to the university this year, so that I could do community college for a while instead. Apparently, he was so pissed off about me that he didn't go back this year either. No one knows what he's doing now. TLDR, DM gets creepy obsessive with me. I reject him. He gets pissed off and ruins his own reputation until people stop showing at his campaigns. Edit. He would also brag to people that his therapist diagnosed him as a sociopath. That was another big red flag. This whole thing is filled with red flags on that note. This DM absolutely sucks. There's not much more to be said on that account. I am happy that this story comes along with receipts. That's always a good thing. Keep your receipts, everyone. You never know when they could come in handy for telling a good tale. First off, content warning for some sexual situations and textbook emotional abuse, garnished with some good old-fashioned homophobia. And before you get discouraged by how damn long the story is, there's a happy ending, and someone gets punched in the face. So I started playing D&D all the way back in 4th edition with some friends from high school. After we graduated, we all went to the same college together and kept playing, eventually switching from 4th edition to 5th edition. We saw each other every week, but we all had social lives outside the game. It was pretty rare for us to hang out or talk outside of our group text. After graduation, myself and a couple of other players left the state for our jobs or higher degrees, but most of the group stayed in the area where we grew up. We thought us moving out would be the end of our game, but this was at the time where playing online in things like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds started to take off. We took a couple of months off, but we decided to continue our game on Fantasy Grounds, albeit with a new DM, who hadn't been with our group at all before. We are pretty chill about newcomers joining our group, and we weren't going to complain if our forever DM could finally get to just play. I'll be calling the new DM Hal, after the character in the movie Megamind because, well, you'll see. The group met Hal in our hometown soon after I left at some convention. He seemed like a pretty good guy and a great DM. I didn't know much about his personal life for the first few months, mostly because I would only talk to him through Skype when we were playing and on the group text when we weren't. All I knew was that he lived with his parents and that he had a graveyard shift at a nearby hotel. Things started to go wrong when he introduced a new player to the group. He told us that this friend of his was interested in our game, and that every time he told her about it, she would get really excited and ask a lot of questions. Again, we're always happy to introduce a new player to the hobby, so we invited her into all of our games. I'd call her Roxanne, but that's way too long, so we'll call her Penny, to borrow from a similar, less self-aware story. Penny was brand new to D&D, so we had to help her out with the rules, character creation, etc. She would always be asking little questions during the game, which we were all happy to clear up for her, but Hal seemed really annoyed at her, and sometimes he would snap at her with some really inappropriate insults, like, "You dumb tramp," and stuff like that. We would always immediately call him out, saying stuff like, "Whoa, dude, you can't just say stuff like that." And he would always walk it back and say he was kidding and chalk it up to his lack of filter. A little off-putting, but it rarely happened, and he always stopped after being called out. Now, we're a group of millennials in our early adulthood and or college, so jokes about being depressed or overwhelmed were common. We all knew how tough life could get, so we have a little support system going where if you can't make it to a session because of life stuff or you just are feeling too tired, it's not that big of a deal to sit a session out. Sometimes we'd also take like 10 minutes before or after the game to just vent about work or school or whatever if anyone needs to get something off their chest. We thought that this was a pretty neat system to make sure our friends could stay healthy and the game could still be fun for everyone. Hal would come to abuse the crap out of this system to emotionally manipulate every single one of us. About a year after she joined, Penny started to arrive late to a couple of sessions, and even miss one or two of them. Again, this is normally fine. Life happens, and we're just playing D&D. But for some reason, this made Hal really upset. He would mope for the entire session, say things like,
"What is the point of doing all of this prep if my players won't show up?"
even though it was literally just one player, and we've had people miss the sessions before. And he would generally say he was feeling really depressed. Penny got better at making it to the games on time, but Hal seemed to get worse and worse. He would drag the entire group down and make self-deprecating quote-unquote jokes so often I'm almost sure he was fishing for someone to say, "No, don't worry, we care about you." He even went so far as to joke about putting things like, "I'm seriously considering doing it tonight," or "You guys have been such great friends. Goodbye," in our group text. We all assumed he was just clinically depressed, which, who knows, he might have been. So we were understanding and tried to help him out and talk to him when we could. That's when I realized what was really going on. Here's what really happened, gathered from my long conversations with both Hal and Penny. So Hal and Penny met on a site called 4chan, first red flag, I know, as part of a thing called Adopt a NEET, where people who are considered NEET, I'm pretty sure it's an acronym for something, but it basically means people who aren't employed and aren't going to school or anything, are paired up with quote-unquote providers who give them food, housing, and sometimes spending money, all out of the kindness of their hearts. Well, as you can probably guess, the providers often ask for something in return for all that stuff. Anything from cleaning the house to, you guessed it, sex. So Hal agreed to let Penny stay in his basement and buy groceries for her, and Penny agreed to be his friend with benefits. I threw up in my mouth a little bit when I heard it for the first time, but as far as I can tell, both of them knew what they were doing at the time, and it was all consensual. In the end, I thought it was weird, but hey, these are consenting adults, and they seem to be enjoying themselves. They had both been in our group for a couple of months when Penny apparently got into a serious relationship with another girl. As I understand it, they talked about it and Penny started paying rent, I assume at a heavy discount, and Penny and Hal went from being friends with benefits to being just friends, / landlord and tenant. This is around the time that Hal became a little unstable in our game. Turns out, the reason she would arrive late or miss sessions was because she was spending time with her partner. Hal would always ask for specific details every time she went out, and if she wasn't back by the time she said she would be, he would apparently send increasingly paranoid and sometimes text to her. He told her that he was just protective about his friends and that his anxiety was making him paranoid. This, friends, is classic grade A manipulation. According to Penny, he would also hug her at random times and ask to cuddle with her because he's touch-starved. Whatever that means. For those playing at home, that does get us to creep bingo. After I learned about this stuff, I got extremely worried about the whole situation. Was this, legal? Did they both tell me everything, or is something worse actually happening? Would I be just as responsible if I stood by and let it happen? I convinced myself that if I replied every time he made some sad comment or called him immediately after he threatened again, he would be talking to me and he would not have a chance to emotionally manipulate Penny or any of my other friends. After all, they didn't know what he was doing, and I did. If I could somehow get to him, make him see that what he's doing is wrong, I could get him to leave everyone alone and go back to the way things used to be. I told my therapist the whole story because it was ruining D&D night. The one thing that let me relax and forget about work for 5 hours a week. She helped me realize two things. First, in trying to save everyone else, I had actually gotten myself stuck in his web, feeding him with attention and affirmation. Second, and this was hard to admit to myself, the reason I was able to recognize his patterns before anyone else was because I was seeing myself in him. The same feeling of superiority that made him take advantage of everyone else was making me think it was my responsibility to save them. So I let myself ignore him more and more, tried to think of more practical solutions, actually started hanging out with the rest of the group, Penny included, and for the first time in almost a year, I actually had fun with my childhood friends again. But Hal was still there, and the more fun we had, the harder he would try to bring us down. My friends and I knew what he was doing, but Penny refused to believe that he meant any harm. Eventually, we suggested that he may just be trying to manipulate her, and she said she knew he wasn't because she knows him. It broke my heart a little, but I understand that breaking out of years of abuse isn't something that's going to happen in 1 or 2 conversations while playing Quiplash with a bunch of nerds. So they both kept playing with us. Eventually, he stopped bringing his problems to the table after he realized we really weren't buying it. Alright, horror story's over. If all you wanted is to be creeped out by someone using the uncanny valley of emotional abuse, stop reading here. But we were lucky enough to have been given catharsis and a happy ending, so I'd be remiss if I didn't share it for those invested enough to read this far. So ever since we were in high school, we all had this dream of going on a big trip together and playing D&D somewhere exotic. Now that we were mostly adults and most of us were gainfully employed, we could actually afford to do that. So we planned our trip to Disney World with the whole gang. We pooled our resources and saved up for years, and the people that could afford it paid for the people who couldn't. Although Hal was very insistent on paying for Penny's share himself. Wonder why. I was in charge of the lodging, so I made sure to separate the guys and the girls so there wouldn't be any trouble. Silly me to think it would be that simple. The trip was fun, but we had to spend most of our energy keeping him from harassing her. Every chance he got, he would try to touch her in some way or buy her something inappropriately expensive, so she either had to take it or look ungrateful, and just generally whining when he didn't get his way. We asked him why he kept trying to do that, and he said he was like this with all his friends, and he's just a physical kind of guy. This all sounds very creepy, but I had a complete blast for the entire trip. It was like I was a little kid, and he was a cereal-starved anthropomorphic rabbit chasing a bowl of cereal he never actually got. First, of course, he didn't like the room assignments. He said dividing us by gender was sexist. So I asked if it would be okay if Penny switched with one of the other guys, and of course he said yes. We planned to share beds, so I let him choose which one to sleep in. And when he did, I put my stuff down on it. He tried to protest, but there wasn't a way to say it without making it obvious that he just wanted to sleep with Penny. So instead, he settled for making a slightly homophobic comment about how he had Penny sleep with the gay guy. Okay, very homophobic. He would try to sit next to her on rides, and I would just plop myself right in between them. I tried putting my arm around him on the Jungle Cruise, and he smacked me away and said, "Don't touch me." I just looked at him and said, "I thought you were like that with all your friends. I'm just trying to make sure you're not touch-starved." I have seen those poor rodeo bulls look less angry than he did. When we did play D&D, my character was conspicuously targeted by every spell and attack possible. He said he was trying this thing where the DM rolls death saves and not the players to add suspense. Imagine my surprise when my character miraculously died after 3 rolls. On the last day, he pulled me aside. He started yelling at me about how I am getting in his way, and he accused me of trying to get with Penny, like I was trying to take her away from me. I said that both Penny and I were in different committed relationships already, and that he doesn't own her. He got louder and louder, sprouting every incel nice guy talking point like a damn tape recorder. I'll admit, I got a little pissed at him, so I said the most hurtful thing that came to my mind. If you actually saw her as a person, you wouldn't have to lock her in her basement to get her to be with you. Yeah, he punched me. Hard. I don't remember anything after that, but I apparently fell and he started kicking me. I had a giant bruise all across the side of my face, and my torso looked like a grapevine. But I had something much more precious than that. An actual crime. Camera footage. Witnesses! I watched this man get dragged off by people wearing Mickey Mouse name tags. Literally the best thing that's ever happened to me. Penny was absolutely pissed at him, and whatever concern she had for him turned into pity. She was luckily able to make her flight home and moved out as soon as she got there. Hal and I had to stay, sadly. I spent today in the hospital, and I had to make sure the police had an accurate report of what happened. The cleric and the sorcerer were more than happy to give a statement as witnesses too. We're starting the game back next week. I offered to DM a few one-shots while we got the group back on track. Penny is now living with her girlfriend, and I think they're planning on moving out of the state. And that, kids, is the story of how I fixed my D&D group by getting punched in the face. It's funny for a guy so obsessed with hating chads and jocks. He did things I've only seen movie bullies try to pull. TLDR, DM trades housing for sex, becomes emotionally manipulative when player stops wanting it, and ends up punching me in the face. Alright, pack it up, ladies and gentlemen. We found it. We found the new worst RPG horror story. Yes, the toenail story is pretty bad. The airship is obviously infamous. But this is some next level manipulation, and it ends with physical assault. I don't think we're ever gonna beat this. At the very least, I'm glad this had a happy ending. The OP has explained why this guy stuck around for so long. Penny was really tied to this guy due to her housing situation, and yeah, that really sucks. There's no other way for me to say it. It is really crazy that emotional manipulation can be a part of Dungeons & Dragons, and for most of you, I hope that it never is, and I'm pretty sure that for most of you, it never will be. However, because D&D is a social game where you are playing with other people that you are going to spend hours upon hours with, social problems are going to rear their ugly heads, and in the worst case, it can take the form of emotional manipulation. With that being said, I'm glad this got a happy ending, and I'm glad the OP managed to solve this problem by getting beaten up. What a legend. Okay, that last story, that was something. But anyway, if you enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and will let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, I have a few reviews for D&D stuff in my One Crispy Review series. You can check that out in the cards, and while you're there, you can subscribe to Crispy's Tavern as well to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment "the basement" to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Next, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.